I don't think God rested on the seventh day, Bernard. I think he reveled in his creation, knowing that someday it would all be destroyed.
What is up, Westworld fans? My name is BobaTalks and welcome to another Westworld breakdown. Now this episode, and I hope we can all agree here, was just absolutely flipping fantastic and my most exciting and most favorite episode that I found this whole season so far, and possibly in the whole of both seasons. So much was going on that I feel like it's going to be impossible for me to cover, but I don't know, I feel like there was a lot of bombshells that got revealed in this episode, and I was quite surprised, to be honest, how much got revealed. Since we still have 2 episodes after this one. Now, the next episode looks very interesting because that episode from the trailer looks like it'll be focusing on this character who has also been pretty consistent throughout different narratives and flashbacks throughout season 2. But anyway, let's crack on. But of course, guys, if you want to see more Westworld videos just like this, subscribe if you're brand new with notifications on so you do not miss out on a single Westworld video, and be sure to give this video a like if you do go ahead and enjoy it. So one of my most favorite things about Westworld, and I'm sure you've heard me say this a million times, is their remarkable ability to tell a story in an often confusing way, but sometimes not, as we know timelines exist in this show, which make it even more fascinating, because it's like, is this the future with the valley beyond kind of situation, or is it the kind of present, or is it like a flashback? And in this episode, yet again, it started off with Charlotte talking to Bernard after the battle at the Westworld HQ took place, and she asked him obviously to tap into his memories, and that is when the majority of the episode took place. And then there was a nice little wrap up at the end where it kind of, we've got brought out of it into the future. Yeah, that was just really cool. I love how a lot of this season, practically, well, most of it, if not all of it, has revolved around Bernard's time slippage, but for once in this episode, Charlotte actually wanted to access his memory files. But obviously this didn't actually happen until we got our first big bombshell, which obviously took place before what I just said, and I should have mentioned it first, with Charlotte and, you know, Delos and you name it, finding out that Bernard is a host. And I love that analogy of you know, the skeletons in the closet, because as we know, before the Westworld intro played, we got that scene where Charlotte and Strand and everyone walked in the room full of Bernards, which was a really cool reveal. It was inevitable. It wasn't too surprising because we've seen that from the trailer, so I was wondering when that was going to happen, and I was quite surprised that they left it to episode 7. But nevertheless, this was the first bombshell in a whole episode of really fun bombshells. And we also got a flashback to Teresa Cullen, if you remember, who Bernard actually murdered, not because he wanted to, but because of bloody Ford. You know, we saw the blood stain against the wall where he bashed her head in, and this all came about because Delos found a little bit of her DNA, and it didn't make sense to where her body was found, so it had to be either Ashley or Bernard who did it. And poor Ashley, man, he was pretty good in this episode as well. He's actually one of the few Westworld staff that I like and has a bit of a conscience. I know he's not Delos, and most of the Delos are dicks. I felt very sorry for Bernard when he was being tortured. Isn't Charlotte such an asshole? I mean, I guess Delos are in general, but you know, Bernard was obviously perceiving that he was being waterboarded. They can technically do anything with it if they have the right tech, you know, with the right tablet that does the right thing to the host. You can make him imagine anything is happening to him, and they were really trying to find out where Dolores and what Dolores did with Peter Abernathy's control unit. Amongst these scenes at the same time, we had Dolores walking in, and this was one of my favorite shots of the episode, and there was a few shots like this as well, with Dolores just walking in with an army of hosts behind her, with that absolute smirk on her face. Like, it was more of like a, I don't know, like a walk and a march of absolute conviction to get her father. And man, does she look so kick-ass. And I just love how she's kept this like costume on practically the whole time, because she could get in something a bit more easier. I don't know, just take herself out of the skirt she's in and stuff like that. But I'm really glad they haven't done that, because I don't know, it's very iconic. There's been several scenes in this episode where we've just seen her walk from behind, and she looks so powerful. I don't know, I just love it. I love those shots, the way they captured it on camera. It was just a mad scene with mad music. It was just remarkable, especially when the Delos troops were going in to kill the hosts, and they had this like really cool gear that kind of let them see in the dark a little bit and detected where the hosts might be. But then they even got screwed over because the response Bernard's team were obviously slaughtered by the host. One of my most anticipated moments in this episode was obviously the continuation of that scene we got at the end of last episode with Bernard talking to Ford. And oh my god, guys, we got so many reveals with this, and it was just glorious. If you're like a really big Westworld fan, every bit of information we got was almost too much to digest. I love that quote he said when he was first talking. The first line he actually said to Bernard, he said something like, to see the world in a grain of sand, a heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in the hour. Now this is a quote from William Blake, and I'm not obviously going to go too into this because then this would be a whole different kind of English breakdown literature kind of thing. But I think what Ford was just trying to say there with, you know, to see the world in a grain of sand, you know, heaven in a wildflower, but hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in the hour. Obviously, a lot of the stuff we learned in this episode with Ford is this kind of plane that he's in. He is very much so alive. And it's almost a heaven of sorts, and it's a place where you can live on. We got the reveals, which I will go into in a second, with, you know, obviously people wanting to be hosts, ironically, which is mind-blowing. So I just thought that was really, really cool, and I really like that quote in general from William Blake, and the fact that Ford used it in this little, I don't know, mind world that they were in. The absolute awe in Bernard's face when he just was like, Robert, how are you alive? And Ford just like, do you seriously think that James Delos would have spent all that money just to resurrect himself? He was a businessman. He would have preferred death to a bad investment. Now that is very true, and what we have to remember is that William really convinced you know, James Delos of this side of the park. You know, and we've learned a lot about this in the meantime. We've learned that James Delos got, you know, cloned, or they were trying to copy the human mind into a host body. We've learned this over the past few episodes. Obviously didn't go too well for Mr. Poor James Delos, but that is what ultimately tied him over. Initially it was just like, why would, you know, as cool as this technology is and entertainment, you know, coming to a park, amazing, imagine if that was real. But then William was like, no, there's something more behind this, collecting the data, blah 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 blah, you know, there was so much more to it. So this is how Ford is alive. Bernard, as very much so predicted by practically everyone, that control unit that he created was Ford, for Ford himself. Now this is obvious. Not only did I just love that Ford was back in the show in this episode, and hopefully will be in the last 3, so I guess it's not been a huge commitment for Anthony Hopkins, but you know, it's so pleasant to see him back in the show with this conclusion of the last chapter. And you would have to think that he would still be in the next couple of episodes, maybe minus the next one, depending on how much we see of the story that we saw in this episode play out in that episode, considering sometimes we just don't see Dolores at all in previous episodes. Sometimes, you know, there's other things to tell. Going back to the things I love about this whole scene that played, you know, on and off throughout the episode, with Ford saying, I don't think God rested on the 7th day. I think he reveled in his creation, knowing that someday it would all be destroyed. And he's obviously definitely talking about Westworld there, and I also think this is a tie-in to in the episode what potentially the key could be used for, in terms of what Charlotte said, in terms of how it's an absolute kind of backup if in case of a catastrophic event happens. I think that might be to kind of blow up the park. And you know, when Ford also said, don't you understand, Bernard, what this place really is? I think amongst many other things, it could just also be a heaven, like a backup, like an afterlife, what humans are seeking. Not necessarily heaven, whatever way you look at it, but ultimately immortality. Because there was this other line in the episode which was just really definitive of what this whole season has been striving with, the beginning of a mystery, but now revealed into immortality, with what humans want to become hosts. The definitive line for that was just purely everything in the real world has been backed up. You know, it's been like a digital drive in the world of Westworld, except the human mind, the last analog device in a digital world, which is completely true. We even got that scene later in the episode when Charlotte was talking to Dolores, and that was just glorious within itself. She finally got a bit of intimidated by somebody else. She wasn't in control for once. And the way this ties in with what Ford said is in just how Dolores was talking about, even though, you know, she knew the secret, and she was saying how the humans created them, and in a way they are better, and now they even want to be just like them. I really like the explanations behind the park and how it's been a whole experiment, and this is why the stories have barely changed over 30 years. Simply put, the guests come to the park, they don't know they're being watched, and this was, you know, all William's fault, and I'm betting this is what obviously William has been trying to stop this whole time at the same time as playing the game. They get to see their true selves, that every choice reveals another part of their cognition, their drives, so that Delos can understand them and copy them. Now, the only part that confused me a little bit in the episode is how Ford talks about how humans want to live forever and they want to become immortal, but he thinks that free will is a mistake. But that's when Bernard says, you made Dolores kill you. But he then says, I knew what she would do, but I didn't compel it. And then we got a scene later with Bernard, just before Ford was talking about taking the free will away. Bernard literally says the line, you said hosts could determine their own fates, you gave us free will. So he definitely has given the hosts free will, but it seems like he does really regret that. I would love to know what you guys thought of this scene in general and what I just actually said about the whole free will situation. Other things that we did learn is that Delos still literally can't do it, and we knew that anyway with kind of seeing James Delos still completely an unsuccessful case, and I can't remember how many times they attempted it, but it was a lot of times. Ford basically explained how they have learned to copy a mind for sure, just like, you know, put it in the control units, and it's like an analogy of like a soft-headed boy humming to a tune somebody else composed, so you just can't quite do it. But the person who actually composed that tune, you know, is the original guy, and you'll never be able to really recreate the actual composition itself. So Ford's mind works here, but just not in the real world. He'll degrade in the real world or just go mad like James Delos. So that's what happens when we actually try to back up a human mind and make it immortal by transferring it to a literal host. And this is where we got another really cool bombshell in a way, because Ford wanted to explain to Bernard, but also this is a whole massive explanation for the audience, in how Bernard is different. How is Bernard different? It's because he was created. He isn't actually human mind being backed up onto our host, just like James Delos, because this is almost a mystery people have been asking. But how is Bernard technically Arnold? And now this may have been predicted or theorized by people, because we all know the Westworld community are really, you know, dig proper deep with this stuff, and probably have guessed it right in many a way. But when Arnold died, William hadn't yet actually approached Delos, and the project wasn't actually around yet. The flashback scenes we saw of William approaching James Delos to try and get this whole backing up a human mind onto our host wasn't in existence. It wasn't a thing, but this is something Ford still wanted to do. So the only thing he had left of Bernard to try and actually create this similar process was his memory. And the thing is, memories of us aren't concrete, but memories of a host are almost like literal recordings. So Dolores was the perfect person to recreate the man she was so close with, the man who created her, and she would be the ultimate examiner and the person to sign off on if Bernard were to be the perfect recreation of Arnold. And that is what also makes sense with the scenes of when we saw Dolores say the line, just like what William said back in the day of when he was trying to copy the human mind of Fidelity. So this is when almost effectively Ford almost takes away Bernard's free will. Bernard seems to kind of still have a free will, but at any point now, Ford can take over control of Bernard's, you know, system or body, if you want to call it that, or a host, just like he did in the episode where he didn't want to kill those guards. So he still has his, like, you know, natural responses there, but that's when Ford took over, and he's constantly seeing Ford now, and, you know, he killed those people. So this is going to be very interesting from now on. Ford can essentially, he's basically pulling the puppet strings of Bernard from now on, so things might get very ugly. So now let's talk a little bit about Maeve, and that scene where her narrative literally coincided with what happened many years ago, when she had the narrative outside the brothel house of her with her daughter on that like little place somewhere randomly in Westworld, where also the man in black came along, where, you know, he's been a dick back in the day. He literally went in there, shot Maeve's daughter, stabbed Maeve herself, and almost the exact same thing was happening in a way, in terms of how he was looking for cover, Maeve was looking for cover from the Indians, and it's almost... It really is making me think of the whole tie-in, is William actually a host? Did he manage to successfully do this to himself or something like that? And this could be another bombshell, which also people are obviously theorizing about. Because as well, he took like, what, 4 or 5 freaking shots? Like, I know it's TV, but still, it just makes me think, is he a freaking host? I don't know. Like, I would prefer it, actually, if he isn't, because it just makes him that much more of a badass for taking all those bullets. But yeah, these scenes were so powerful. Maeve was finally like, F you, man. I screw you. She was basically using her, like, what I like to call the Force now, to take over the other host, to shoot William, or I'm just gonna call him the Man in Black. Even Lawrence resisted, which I found really cool, because obviously he's one of the very awake hosts. But she brought something out in him, saying, just think about it for a second. He may be, or may have done something nice recently to you, like as the Man in Black put it himself, saying, I saved your family, you know, this time. But that's the precise thing, William. This time, you've done dreadful things in the past, like where we saw flashback scenes to season 1, I believe. So it's very poetic in a way how Lawrence actually really shoots him, but that is when Lawrence gets shot, and I assume, I don't know, dies. I really hope we see that guy again. Maybe there is a chance of that, but, you know, with the whole backup situation, which is something we're going to get to next, being, you know, gone now, is Lawrence really gone for good? Maybe it could be repaired, but that is when Maeve also gets shot, and this ties in with goddamn Sizemore, because if you remember in the previous episode he called for backup, they sprayed practically everyone there. Maeve got shot, and I like how Sizemore really kind of was like, do not touch her, you know, she's one of the good ones, basically. But that still didn't stop her from getting shot, so, you know, well done, Sizemore. You know, you kind of care about her now, but, like, you still got a shot, so yeah. Oh, and of course, Maeve's daughter got taken by the Indians as she was shot down. This leads me to that scene, which is after everything I'm about to talk about with Dolores. It's really cool to see those two again, but she pointed out something very interesting, which made me think, is Dolores ultimately going to be, in a way, kind of Season 3's villain? I think there's always going to be good sides, and she might come out the other end one day, but I could really see it happening, because basically Dolores said, your daughter is just another thing that, or another rope that they use to lash us down. And Maeve just put it like, is that how you can justify what you've done to him? It's basically pointing out that Dolores completely controlled Teddy, rebooted him, and essentially did exactly what Westworld, or the Westworld HQ, do to the host, reprogram, you name it. So Dolores, even though in her mind she felt like it was for the greater good, and, you know, I had to do this, you know, blah blah, she is becoming what she dislikes most in a way. It is very point of viewy, because I love Dolores and everything, I get what she's doing, but Maeve really pointed out a good thing there, so I'd love to know what you think about that scene between those two. But ultimately, all that's left to talk about now is the scenes with Charlotte and Dolores and Ashley, all that kind of stuff that happened in that part of the episode. I absolutely freaking loved that goddamn face that Dolores gave Charlotte when Charlotte opened her mouth. She just turned around and just looked at her like, you effing what? Like, you know, Charlotte was just trying to appeal to her like she was a child. Like, oh, come on, Dolores, you know, she wasn't having any of it. Do you really think these hosts are that stupid that you can almost manipulate them or groom them into, like, calming them down? I think all of us almost wanted Dolores to go through with taking limb by limb of Charlotte, and this just goes more towards my evidence of Dolores going a bit more towards the dark side. And but I thought that scene, yet again, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, was beautiful between her father and her, and ultimately she extracted the control unit. Charlotte managed to escape an absolute horrendous torture with Ashley. It's going to be interesting to see those two together as well, because Ashley and Charlotte obviously had a bit of drama because he wanted to know what the heck was going on with the key inside Abernathy's head. But there were some other really cool things we learned that Dolores wanted to do and successfully did with the backups, because Charlotte was just like, oh, the backups, basically boasting, saying that's, you know, we can just do this, or we have all your backups, and Dolores was just like, our backups aren't our advantage, there are chains, they reprogram us. Do you really think I'd let that continue? So now all the hosts, especially after I believe Angela blew up the cradle, they're all unique now. They're just as unique as a singular person, just like me or you. There is no backup. They cannot be brought back. This is it. Unless we find out in, like, I don't know, season 3 or 4, there is a backup of the backup. But God knows. Who knows? But whilst we're talking about Dolores, you know, getting closer and closer to villainy, you can completely sympathize with it in a way, because when she was about to torture Charlotte, she also said, oh, sweetheart, begging doesn't help. You'd know that if you had lived the lives I have. But towards the end of the episode, we go back into present after all of this crap happened. Ties back to the beginning of the episode where Charlotte was interrogating Bernard after, yeah, all of this happened. And they learn where Peter Abernathy's control unit is. Now, I'm not sure if this is a deception on Bernard's part, because technically, you know, you would have thought with Ford in there, this might be. So I have no idea. I'd love to know your thoughts on that as well. But also Strand is taking Bernard back to the valley beyond. So it looks like we're going beyond the very beginning scenes we saw, which we thought were the very final moments of the finale. And technically they were towards the end of this series, but now there is more beyond what we thought could have been the very, very, very definitive cliffhanger. So is he just planning to throw him or shoot him off that cliff and put him in the valley beyond? I would love to know your thoughts there. But ultimately, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. There's a million other things I could go on about. This video obviously is long enough as it is. It was a fantastic episode. I would just love to know all of your thoughts on everything I discussed in this video. I'm just almost speechless after seeing it. It was just mind-blowing. Other than that, guys, if you liked this video and if you did get this far, I'd really appreciate a like. And if you want to see more breakdowns and in-depth breakdowns like this, be sure to subscribe for more Westworld videos. I of course want to thank all of my patrons. If you're curious and you want to become a patron yourself, the link is in the top of my description. Check out the rewards, the tiers, and check out some of the rewards you get in terms for pledging to them. Other than that, I have social media. Be sure to follow me on Twitter. I have a Discord server. But other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.